Thomas Sheridan people and some magical Egypt people. So for the people who are the lovely Thomas Sheridan people, I'm Vanese McNeill, and I'm the producer of the Magical Egypt series. And you might say, why is Magical Egypt talking to Thomas Sheridan? Well, there's a very good reason. And in fact, I saw an incredible quote that kind of speaks to the point very, very succinctly. So I'm going to quote Nikola Tesla. And he said, the day science begins to study the non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries. And what we're exploring in season 3 of Magical Egypt is this exact same phenomena. And we believe that if we start looking at the non-physical phenomena, Egyptology is going to open up like a flower. And so the reason I have this gentleman here is he is, in my opinion, one of the most intimately acquainted with the non-physical phenomena. You seem to be able to just play it like an instrument, my darling. And so that's why I wanted my people to know you. So I'm going to hand this over to you, my love, and please play your non-physical instrument for us like you do.
Like an Egyptian. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Vanessa, and everyone at Magical Egypt for allowing me this second opportunity to talk to you guys. And the last time we had a lovely talk about the tarot and my approach to the tarot in terms of it more being a psychological tool than a divination tool, but at the same time too, a good way of hacking the psychology of yourself in order to engage with this 5 sense reality in this world a little bit more easier. This one is kind of similar. It's to do with magic, and also my own theories on folk magic, which I believe is still stuck in the agrarian past and has not been properly addressed even by things like chaos magic, which, although is a kind of a folk magic when you think about it, it doesn't really set down concepts in terms of ideas of taking the whole folk magic into the modern era. Now, we're going to be talking about a lot of things tonight over the next hour and a half or so, and it will be probably worth your while to take notes down. There might be a video of this uploaded on YouTube in a year or so or something like that. But for now, take these notes down, and it'll be a good primer on what ultimately we're going to do. And that's to soften the subatomic particles of the underlying quantum field, which is really what this is about. Now, like the Tesla quote at the beginning was fascinating and very apt, and I'll tell you why. There was always an assumption that the more technologically advanced we became in terms of understanding science, the less things like magic would be mystique, important, relevant in people's lives, because we could say, oh, it's magic and stuff like that. Oh, it's science, so it's okay. So magic, the old, accolade that magic is just science that hasn't been discovered yet. That's 100% true, completely true. Material scientist people are bang on correct when they say that. However, the mistake that they make is they're very far from having discovered everything. And in this quest and delve into the scientific world, what has really happened is magic has become validated rather than it being excluded into the world of nonsense and myth and all this kind of thing. It has been brought to the fore with things like dark matter energy. 90+% of the universe is made up of this thing called dark matter energy that frankly doesn't exist. And they know about dark matter energy because there's not enough gravity in the universe to sustain the universe, and particularly spiral galaxies. There's simply not enough gravity within all the bodies of a spiral galaxy in order to maintain its integration and have it spin and create a spiral. And that's where the concept of this missing force came in. And they named this missing force dark matter energy. And it represents almost 90% of the universe. So 90% of the universe around you right now is missing, okay? So for mechanical or reductionist scientists and scientism type people to turn around and say, oh, this is a theory of this or a theory of that, or we have fixed universal fixed constants on everything, it's not possible. You cannot do that kind of data analysis when 90% of the data is missing. And also, as they get further into the world of cosmology and also into the world of quantum theory and particle physics, the universe got stranger and stranger. And they started to discover that reality was not solid. And although they've always known for a long time, going back to the ancient Greeks, that it was made from atoms or small particles of some kind, what they didn't really fully understand is when they actually got to look at these particles, what they discovered was they're mostly empty space. There's nothing in there. And therefore, there's nothing in the universe except fluctuations of energy, which cause the creation of matter by observation. So therefore, what the Indian Brahmins told us about Maya and so on, that the universe is all the mind of God observing itself in creation, this has all been validated by modern science. And we've known this stuff for a very long time. This ability to understand that reality is malleable is the key to changing reality. Now, you hear this thing all the time in the New Age circles. Everything is energy. Everything is there to be changed, and energy is there to be altered. But it's not that easy. That's like saying, okay, the World Cup can be won, but you're not good enough to play football to win the World Cup, or you can win an Olympic gold medal in swimming. You're not good enough a swimmer to do that. So it's not a case of it can be done for definite. It's more a case of it is achievable, but it's only achievable in various quantities and various specific things. And this is where the idea of a kind of the difference between a neophyte and an adept comes from, to all the way up to a master you could have. The issue is that you have to understand the fundamental laws of the universe. Now, there's only one fundamental law of the universe that has been, in my opinion, has quantified the magical concept, as well as the progress of science, and that is that the subatomic field is incredibly dense. By dense, I mean it's so difficult for our consciousness in this stage of development of our biology and psychology, and it's particularly our nervous system, in order to alter these subatomic particles that are unbelievably packed at the quantum level. Now, it is hacked now and again. Miraculous things happen. We've all heard the stories of a mother whose son or baby was trapped underneath a car during an accident, and she found the strength to lift a 2-ton car off the child. She hacked the matrix. She busted through and loosened and softened those incredibly dense subatomic particles. And from that was able to transcend the physical limitations of her own biology. Now, this tells you a lot. What was the primary motivation in that? To save her child. What was the primary driver of that? The sheer intensity and focus of her will, a pure stream of psychic energy. There was nothing in the entire cosmos between her and the need to save her child. And that's the magical process. When I use the term attenuation in magic is different than attenuation in things like electronics, although it's similar. What it means is to remove things that are inhibitors towards the achieving of this softening up of the subatomic field in order to make it malleable and make things happen. Now, we know for a fact that woman did that because she was like the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, in the rage. The rage sets him off. Well, it was her will to save her child is what hacked her matrix and turned the 2-ton car into something as light as a feather she picked up, because she had attenuated all the inhibitors out of her own quantum field. Her own nervous system was then able to go into places it could not go before. And that's how magic works, basically. The inhibitors that prevent us from hacking into the matrix and opening it up, achieving the impossible, is the primary barrier between us and attaining the power of a god. And it's really, that's what it's all about. It's a simple process, but so is climbing Mount Everest. So is, winning an Olympic gold medal. Yes, you have to run and win the race, but that's not to say anyone can do that. Yes, you have to get climbing gear and you have to climb the mountain. Yes, that's not to say anyone can do that. But you might get a third of the way up to the mountain. You might come fourth in the race if you train hard enough without any previous experience or dedicate yourself to it. The same thing happens with the magical process. Now, what is reality? Reality is purely an observational function of our nervous system. That's all it is. Our nervous system observes this reality and it brings it into manifestation. You all know about the double slit experiment where there was a wave and a particle. And when it was observed, it changed. It changed in how it was. Now, this is probably how, talking of ancient Egypt, how they, and even other parts of the world where megaliths are, and particularly stones that are polygonal stones that are softened and interlocked into incredible jigsaw shapes you see in Peru and everywhere, really. I believe that there's some kind of process there, that they changed, they had a different form of science rather than going through the Western, I wouldn't say the Western, I'll just say that the general reductionist science of measuring, observing, quantifying, and then retesting. They dive straight, I believe the ancient Egyptians dive straight into, I'm talking about the pre-pharaonic Egyptians, not the the Cleopatra and those ones. I'm talking about the pre-pharaonic Egyptians who built the Giza monuments. They dived directly into the world of quantum physics and quantum theory, and that way they were not inhibited. There's that word again, by the mechanistic laws of fixed constants of the universe and of the physical and natural world. And that to me is the secret of how these things were done. That's why they have an effect on us. A stone circle is a circle full of stones. It shouldn't have an emotional effect on us. It does. A pyramid on the Giza plateau shouldn't have an emotional effect on us. These polygonal walls in Peru and everywhere else, but they have an emotional effect on us because at some level in that stone, something has taken place in the past that our nervous system is still picking up on. And it's the echo or the residual leftover of a phenomenal process that the ancients knew that involved working with stone and masonry. And this is a big part of the magical orders in the West, right through from the Masons who built the cathedrals of the Middle Ages to the present, are trying to get into that. They're trying to get in there. It's one of the secrets of Masonry, is that they know that there was a different kind of science outside the mechanistic worldview that achieved that, and that's magic. And reality, as I said, is affected by psychological, emotional, and psychic elements of your own personality. Like the mother who picked the car up off the child, you will find in small ways all through your life, you've hacked the matrix. You were thinking about someone and a phone, they hadn't spoken to you in years, and the phone rang. It's odd, there's loads of these things. You will find sequences of numbers that appear in sequences that are very strange, like the 1111 thing and so on. And the thing is that it's like tending to a garden. The more work you put into it, the less work is achieved from year to year in order to produce the harvest that you have. So therefore, you notice these synchronicities. When you notice these synchronicities, and I'll explain this further later on, you're getting an echo back from the subatomic fabric, which is trying to not communicate with you, but is giving you your own data and your own quantification that your actual nervous system is affecting this. There's not enough talk and effort given into the notion, the concept of the nervous system in magic and occult. You get so much else, psyche, sex, the whole lot, but it's very little about the nervous system. But the nervous system is the prime mover of it beyond your physical body. A wand that you hold in your hand is literally an extension of your nervous system put out through your hand and extended along it. Now, the ancients knew this in certain kinds of woods, willow, holly, broom, and similar kinds of woods, mistletoe. They had a more a more conductive element for charging the nervous system out. This is why, and they also were aware that certain woods were better than other woods because they might have been immune to diseases, like the oak tree. The oak tree is very hardy and very immune to diseases. So there was some kind of element of that oak tree that people would study in the past and realize it had a power others types of tree didn't. And then you would have things like the mistletoe growing on. How can the mistletoe, which is a parasite, can live on certain woods? It's because the same thing, these powers exist within nature. They would observe them within nature. And then they would say to themselves, well, if these things can happen in nature, a tree can make itself disease-free through, and this is long before they understood things like natural selection and the genetics and so on. But it doesn't matter because they were altering their genetics and just not calling it that. And the magic of the past, right through to the present, has always been about this, about affecting the natural world. And that's, you know, the classic definition is to cause change within the material world in conformity with will. What's will? Will is what your desires are, what your needs are. Now, again, like anything else, you could go into the gym. You say you're going to build yourself up in a gym. You can go in there the first day and you can be pulling and lifting weights and benching and all this stuff, and you might get away with it. You'll go home that night, and for the next week, your muscles will be in pieces because you didn't do it slowly. Well, that's what happens with magic when it goes wrong. People go full in, trying to hex somebody, trying to win a lottery ticket, trying to change reality. And the same thing happens to them in a psychic level. They have damaged their emotional system, or the nervous system is shattered trying to do this. It's not attenuating it and removing things out of the way so the pure stream of energy could exist, like the mother who picked up the car off their child. Think of things that happened to you in your life that were crisis points, or points like you fell in love with someone and first saw them for the first time, or you had an amazing moment at a rock concert. The entire universe ceased to exist except you and your relationship with that moment. You attenuated and removed all the inhibitors between you and the pure stream of energy that brought you towards that. And these remain for you the most powerful memories of your life. Why? Because your nervous system was brought to its ultimate ability, and your nervous system remembers this. It was brought to its enormous power. And that tells us that our nervous system wants us to do things like this. Our nervous system wants us to be in these states of ecstasy, these states of sheer energetic bliss, these charges of energy. Now, this is what creates charisma. Now, this is the main factor in so much of magic working and not working, is the ability to create a charismatic charge in the self. Now, you know, when they talk about certain people, they have it or they don't have it, like pop stars, rock stars, actors. I was watching the movie Carrie the other night with Sissy Spacek, and it's a very good film. But there was the scene where the young John Travolta suddenly appears in the movie. It was like he lit up that movie, even though he had a small part in it playing a baddie. His initial appearance in that movie lit that movie up like a firework. And it wasn't surprising that he went on to be such a superstar, like Saturday Night Fever and so on, the movies that came afterwards. That was pure charisma. That's what made, who is that guy? Who is she? You know, this kind of thing. It bounces out of them. It doesn't matter what they look like, who they are, what ethnic group they are. They have that phenomenal charge within them. Jimi Hendrix, you could just go on. They just have it. And it explodes out of them because they have this charismatic charge. And charisma comes from a Greek word meaning the grace of the gods. And they'll often say when people meet these people and say, you know, this person has this remarkable personality, this unbelievable charge about them. This famous star, I met him. And what was he like? Very laid back and easygoing and comfortable in himself. they have just worked on their charisma to the point where everything else about them is superfluous in terms of who they are. The charisma shines through, and all the greatest magicians in history have all had charisma. Crowley had charisma in spades. That's why he was able to get the people he was. And you'll have religious people say things like, oh, well, he just used and manipulated vulnerable people. If you look at the people that were around them, they were not vulnerable. They were often, especially, it's often found uncommon, very sexist, because these were often, strong, independent women that were drawn to him. And you see that with these stars and celebrities who have charisma. They often have very successful relationships. It's sort of like they seem to have long-term good relationships with people around them and so on. And that's also the charismatic thing. The charisma thing is also very seductive and very intoxicating and also appealing. So someone who has charisma, you want to hang out with them. You enjoy them. You feel good around them, even if you're just hanging out with them or engaging with them online or something. Their sheer presence in your life makes you feel better. You feel better about yourself. The charisma comes through. That's a natural magician or someone who's worked on magic to do that. And by the same token, if the charisma is cut off, it can be like it can be like a junkie losing their drug in some people. They literally will go insane. Because they can't get that charismatic charge anymore, and they can't find it anywhere else. And so it causes people to go insane. And that's unfortunately what happened to the likes of Crowley's women. The charismatic, like Rose, the charismatic charge wasn't there. And even Victor Neuber, the charismatic charge wasn't there with anyone else. It wasn't there. The Irish poet W.B. Yeats was intoxicated with Maud Gonne, even though he was married and had a very good marriage to a very intelligent woman called Georgina, who herself was also an occultist and in fact introduced Yeats to the Golden Dawn. But Georgina didn't have the charismatic charge. Maud Gonne did. And that's why he wrote every poem about romance he wrote about her, but he didn't write them about his wife, Georgina. Now, that's not to say that Maud Gonne was the love of his life. Obviously, Georgina was the love of his life. But Maud Gonne was the one who had the charismatic charge that allowed him to produce the great poetry he produced. In fact, one of the reasons she dumped him was to say, and kind of cruelly as well, that the price he paid for losing me was to be one of the greatest poets that ever lived. And that's profound. That's a profound way of thinking. And she was also involved in the Golden Dawn as well. Now, this talks about, when I bring up the concept of the Golden Dawn, I'm talking about systems, ceremonial rituals, and so on. Look, my attitude is, whatever works for you works. Some people say to me, should I join a magic circle? If you think you can get anything from it, go for it. The Golden Dawn, what are they like? I know people who had good experiences there. I know people who didn't have good experiences there, or the OTO or anything else. Go for it. Join a Wiccan coven. Give it a try. It's no harm in having a look. But I still think it's a solitary practice. And I think sometimes if you don't have the necessary charisma, you sometimes do need a coven in order to build up a charge. In fact, I know some witch covens in Italy, and this is what they tell me, that the necessity of needing the charge to escape Mussolini's, what happened was they all lived in Sicily until Mussolini came to power, and Mussolini gave the Catholic Church almost like a witch finder, carte blanche to do what they wanted to do on the folk traditions and magic. As a result, the witches that lived in Sicily literally had to leave southern Italy and go to Turin and northern Italy in order to escape from this. And they brought this magical practice with them. And this is why Turin is a center of the magical power of the world today. They're Sicilian witches mostly who escaped from fascism. The church allowing the fascism to go after them. Now, they will tell you that the reason why they're strictly involved in covens is because it took that to enough. There's a power in grouping, power in numbers help that way. So that's why that can be a very rewarding thing if you're not having a lot of satisfaction in your magical practice alone, join a group, join a coven, learn about things, and then work on practicing and rituals together. But the thing is that that comes with a price, because if there's one individual in there who, should we say, is one of the dark brothers or so on, it will affect the entire group. So, for lots of reasons, and I tend to be a loner with this stuff, mainly because my first introduction to it happened when I was a little kid. I was about, I don't know how old I was, 14. And now I'd been interested in the occult, and I'd read magic books. I grew up as we're talking about, this would be like the late 70s. And you would not believe the sheer number of occult books that were produced in those days, paperbacks. It was phenomenal. There was literally, you could go to any secondhand bookshop and pick up these paperbacks that would be called like The Witch is This, or How to Curse, or How to Do Magic. And they were often written by people who were definitely involved in the magical process. I'm not just talking about like the likes of David Conway, who wrote Ritual Magic, a primer. I'm talking about like people who are involved in Wicca and so on, or Satanism and other forms of the occult, were writing books, and they were very easily available. There was also books like Man, Myth, and His Magic, I think it was called. These are Time Life books there. And there was also Dennis Wheatley's books on the occult, were very useful in learning magic. It was literally, I grew up in, my childhood was saturated with magic. There was a bookshop called the Bamba, and they were Bamba is an ancient name for the goddess Era, the ancient name for Ireland. And they were all over, they were just like regular secondhand bookshops all over the north side of Dublin. And they were like literally full of occult books that people had read. And it was just the way things were back then. It was a great interest in it in the post-hippie times. And so I'd been reading them until this in one instant came along, and it wasn't planned. And I talk about it in my book Sorcery. I was the first time I'd ever read Lovecraft and H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, and I used to read them with a flashlight underneath the covers, under the blankets, and very intense at that age, like in the darkness, pure focus. I'm saying again about attenuation and removing inhibitors. Just me and the words on the page, which is how I used to read as a child, under the bed, and so many kids do, with the blanket. So these stories were blowing my mind at the time, and just loving them, and so completely focused upon them. At the same time, too, I used to also have a little small transistor radio, a little small red Philips transistor radio that had a little LED or whatever, a bulb on it, and it took a 9-volt battery. And you listen to the before they had earbuds, they had headphones, but before they had earbuds, they had these little small earpieces that were mono, went into the jack, just like you have the jack, and you put it in your ear, and you could listen to the radio there. Now, this was a wondrous time in radio when I was that age, because you had 3 bandwidths. You had FM, which is, we all about. You had medium wave, which is local national stations, and you had this thing called long wave. Long wave, I think, only really existed in Europe, and it was basically a way of transmitting signals larger distances. And so you would get stations from Moscow, from Berlin, from Rome, and you just go down when the sun went down, because the rays were affected by the sun. And this taught me about the necessity for darkness in this magical practice, why things take place at night. And the sun was gone down. You could put on your long wave radio and tune in these channels from all over Europe. Terribly exciting, terribly romantic when you're a kid. And then while I was reading, the same night I was reading a Lovecraft story, I don't know which one it was. I put the book down and I'm having listened to the radio, and suddenly comes out of the blue, Rhode Island's #1 Buick dealer. A signal had managed to travel right across the Atlantic to where I lived and into my transistor radio. But firstly, this does happen. They can bounce off various objects in the atmosphere, and the signals can bounce across. That's not that unusual. What was remarkable was that the radio signal, the radio station, I didn't even know what a Buick was. I didn't know it was a car. The radio station had come from Rhode Island, Providence, which is H.P. Lovecraft's hometown. Of all the stations in the world that I could have picked up from North America, up and down the East Coast, where there must have been thousands of radio stations, the one from, and I didn't really know much about Providence or Rhode Island, came right into my radio. And it was just mind-blowing. I was terribly excited that I picked up an American radio station that traveled across the Atlantic. But it wasn't until later, to the profundity of it actually being the station that Lovecraft would have listened to as a child, as a growing up before he died in the 1920s and 30s in Providence and Rhode Island, that it really hit me. And so a kind of a casual taxonomy of the process, I undertook it to see, well, what caused this? And it came to the conclusion that because I was so focused on the Lovecraft story, that it had no longer become, fiction to me. It was so real to me that I'd actually made a radio station travel across the Atlantic, and I heard it from his hometown. It wasn't until later that I realized that what I had done was I had opened up the subatomic fabric of reality to make this happen. Now, this is magic. The taxonomy of the experience made me understand that it was my absolute focus into those stories, being terribly emotionally excited by them, possibly the fact I was deep in puberty at the same time, as well as the being in the dark with just the red LED, just the sound, pitch darkness at night, created this effect. And that's exactly what happened. And this is how you quantify a magical process. Synchronicities. Synchronicities are when you get feedback of the magical process being successful. And it comes in the most remarkable ways. For instance, you could be involved in a magical process, and out of the blue, someone you didn't expect or know turns on you in the most horrible way. That is proof that it's working, because something in them has picked it up and it's repulsed them, or it's affected them, and it frightens them. And you'll find that they're often religious types that do this. They jump back in horror, and or else it could be people who are jealous if you're developing charisma. I've seen this with a few people, not me, but others, where someone was practicing magic, their charisma was developing, and suddenly their friends didn't want to have anything to do with them, or their girlfriend dumped them. And that's because they were running away with their charisma, and they were almost switching into a different frequency mode. Away. And this is like when I talk about things of recent times with the whole lockdown of a parallels society, this is what I'm talking about, was switching our charisma to a different frequency. But the experience of all those things, and synchronicity being the quantifier, is a well-recorded thing. It's always been noted for forever, really. And this is how you know that the process is in development. Now, for instance, I have a ritual that we're all going to do on Halloween, the traditional Halloween, not the pagan one, the October 31st one, which is really a Christian date, but it doesn't matter. That's when the significant charge of Halloween is amongst the population, and that's what we're going to tap into. And this year there'll be a lot of frustration about it, and also a lot of unpent up energy. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a major breakdown in the lockdowns and stuff like that at Halloween, because there's something about that date and that experience that causes these changes, like Devil's Night in Detroit. Now, the thing is that, like, the process I came up with, the working, was for everyone to get an egg, a raw egg from the shops, any kind of egg. You could use any kind of egg you wanted, the duck egg, anything. And I got the egg and told people to imagine a process that will bring the empire of false pestilence down, or has brought it down. It's, remember, when you think in terms of your magical desires, you talk in terms of it's already happened, not it's coming. It's already taken place. You talk in the past tense. And then in any way you want, put a sigil. I'll talk about sigils later. A logo, even a poem, anything, even a little drawing on that egg, and then cast it in on Halloween anytime during the day. We're also getting a powerful moon that day as well, so it's all for the working. And into a river that flows into a river, or a stream that flows into a river that flows into the sea. The transition from salt water from fresh water to salt water is key in this. Now, since I put this in motion, what do you know? All kinds of things have showed up on social media and everywhere about eggs, and it's everywhere. And it's because we're all caught up in this thing that we're now getting quantification from the universe or the cosmic field, that we're hacking it. It's malleable. It's softening up. It's softening up. You know, when you have a car that won't start and you turn it over and it goes over, but every so often, you know, the next one, it's coming. Oh, it's nearly there. It starts up. It's like that. Okay, that's what we're getting. We know it's coming, and it's giving us back information, and this information is making us excited. And the more excited we get, the more information we get on it, the more quantifiers we get. And this is people are seeing. I mean, I'm banned from Facebook at the moment because I shared a Donald Trump funny tweet. But that's also proof that it's working as well. And eggs, I saw one thing was giant egg LED lamps. Now, we did the same thing last year with octopuses. And I said that concentrate on octopuses. Where you go by the sea, concentrate on an octopus. Think about octopuses. Think about our relationship to them. Think about the strangeness of them. Are they aliens from another world? Share your consciousness with the octopus. The reason why I picked an octopus for that experiment was they have a very unique nervous system. They have 9 brains, and they have a very unique nervous system. So of all the animals in the sea, it'd be the easiest one for us to communicate with. Suddenly, very quickly, social media is filled with everything to do with octopuses. And then Netflix brings out this award-winning documentary called My Octopus Teacher. And now everyone in the world is infatuated in love with something that was just octopus. And there we go. We hacked a small number of us, probably not even 20 or 30 of us, maybe more. I don't know. It did it. But just look at that. We hacked the matrix, and we brought about this octopus consciousness that's now very front and center. And we're doing the same with the eggs at the moment. Why is this? Because the intent is pure. Well, by pure, I mean it's our heart's desire. William Butler Yeats wrote a play called The Land of the Heart's Desire, which took place around here, about a bride on her wedding night and the groom, and she has to decide between entering the world of the fairies and living for all eternity, or staying on the earth as a woman who's married to a rather mundane man. And she chooses to live among the fairies. And it's the same, that's the heart's desire, because her heart's desire was to be with the fairies and not to be and get married to some guy down the road, because that's what you do. That wasn't her heart's desire. It's very similar to the concept of dharma within the Vedic tradition. And our intent was pure. We wanted to communicate with the octopus. We wanted to tell the octopus, hey, we're here, we like you, we dig you, you're really special. And that's it. The evidence is, anyone who says that we didn't successfully hack the universe, we did, absolutely. And the same thing with the egg. We're already getting the quantifiers. Why? Because we understand why we want this false pestilence that are currently being used to invoke tyranny upon the human race, destroy creativity. Remember, the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that's happening with this lockdown at the moment, and this is why this video, if this is recorded, will last forever, is because the tyranny is attacking creativity, artists can't get out there, musicians can't play. These are magical processes that the universe and our consciousness and our subconscious minds craves from us, and we can't do it. And that's taking away a fundamental building block of reality, just like the concept of being at the front of everything, the beginning of it. You know, Terence McKenna said, if the artist can't find the way cannot be found. That's absolutely true. That's why magic is called the art. The creative mind has to be out there. It has to share its creative intentions. And we have a lockdown that's stopping singers from singing, actors from acting, and all kinds of performers from performing. And therefore, they're stagnating reality. They're deliberately stagnating reality so they can put a buffer on it, like a buffer stop on a train track, and say no more right now. And reality is unable to. These people know exactly what they're doing. Be well assured of this. This is why they're attacking the clubs, the concert halls, and so on. They're well capable of knowing that this is what happens. Busting through that is key. Now, the reason why we're doing this thing with the egg is to try and release the artists from the bondage that's been given to them, that's been placed upon them by bureaucracy, the bureaucracy of the false pestilence. Now, bureaucracy is profane. Bureaucratic language is the vernacular of the damned. It does not come from a place of creativity. It does not come from a place of expression. It comes from a place of bondage, a place of intimidation, a place of looking down and pointing at you, and you saying you shall do this and no more. It is attenuation for the wrong reason. It stifles, and often using arbitrary concepts, stifles the creative process. Now, the only thing now that can do this is a magical ritual that can bust through this. Not the only thing, but it'll speed the process up of the destruction of this. And this is why I take this thing very serious. It's fun, and you should approach it as fun. It should be, bring your kids down and get them involved in this. But remember, it's for a very just reason that comes from the heart. To free the art, to free the creative mind, to bring it back and to bring this world into what it's supposed to be, a pure stream of creative energy driven by human consciousness going forward. Make no bones about it. This COVID lockdown is not only locking down your city and your country, it's locking down the mechanics of the universe. And these bastards know that. They know that. And so this is why it's important that we do these little things. This is part of the parallel reality. Now, the egg, how does the egg do this? Well, the egg, it has the yolk, the prima materia, and it has the yolk and the white. And in alchemy, the yolk represents gold, and the white represents silver. So you have a symbolic representation of two metals that don't tarnish within the egg. It's the seat of the soul. You concentrate on that and what you want. You will put in the DNA of the egg. The developing embryo of the egg will not grow a chicken or a chicken. It will grow your desires. When the egg is tossed into the water, it's put into the aqua nostra, the new waters, the new possibilities. If that gets smashed on a rock down the river, eaten by a fish, or just naturally decays at the bottom, it does not matter. The prima materia on the inside is released and goes outwards. Eventually, in the molecular body of the river, goes down to the estuary and into the sea, where contained within that is the empire of false pestilence, which is then sequestered for all eternity at the bottom of the ocean to be guarded under the stewardship of the octopus. Now, this may seem laughable to people, but this is animism, the belief that everything in nature has a soul. And this is the fundamental basic building blocks of paganism, is the concept of animism. Now, I'm talking in this language that's not scientific in terms of how someone might be learn about these things, but I'm talking about it in a symbolic, epic, story-like, beautiful way. And that's its power, because that's what sinks into the subconscious mind. And that's what alters the nervous system. So your perception of the prevailing reality going forward is fundamentally altered. It's so beautiful and powerful to think this way. This is why I've been telling you for years. Before you study magic, study Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, the meaning of mythology and myths, folklore, because these are the stories, these are the operating system that allows you to run the software of magic upon top of that. Because they switch you out of the concept of a cold, hard world. You're loosened up. And guess what? Your charisma increases. Your charisma increases. The charismatic charge increases. You feel better about yourself. You feel better about being around people like you. And that's a very simple concept of taking folk magic and bringing it out of the agrarian age. See, that could have been a little, boom, a little echo back from the subatomic field. Aquarius, the water bearer, the Aquanostra, and the agrarian we're talking about now. And this has always been the problem with folk magic, especially now, is that it's still stuck in the agrarian age. So you have these hedge witches and hedge druids. Look, we don't live in an age like that anymore. If you want to do it as an expression, a creative, artistic thing, and you might have some effects with magic, go on. It's a beautiful thing. But time moves on, and this is what the chaos magicians of the 70s realized. And going right back to Austin Osman Spare, and even Jack Parsons with the Babylon working, probably the first act of chaos magic was that he took him and Ron Hubbard took Crowley's fictional novel Moonchild and realized that this was possibly a ritual, much to the annoyance of Crowley, who had Jack Parsons removed from the Agape Lodge in Los Angeles. But they understood this, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Parsons was a member of the LA Science Fiction Club. He would have been familiar with the science fiction and weird fiction of the time, scientific romances, as they used to call them, of H.P. Lovecraft. And he understood that there's something a bit more to this than just the story. They were understanding that when science fiction came along, that this was the modern mythology. Okay, we have the modern mythology, science fiction, scientific romances. Okay, let's build upon that. And then the magic came out. And that's why they say, how did Arthur C. Clarke predict this? How did Lovecraft predict this? How did so many writers predict it, from George Orwell to Ray Bradbury? And people say, oh, they were insiders. No, it wasn't that. The combination of two things, they made it happen through their art and their creativity. People poured their focus into it, and to an element, it became fact. It became fact. The folk magic thing, you can, you have the, you can look at it in all kinds of ways. You can kill a black cat under the third moon, put 2 pomegranate seeds in its eyes and harvest the sprouts and grow 2 pomegranate trees that will produce magical pomegranates for the rest of your life. Yeah, that's how it used to work. The curse of the toad in the well. If you had someone you wanted to curse and imprison them, they weren't familiar with the curse of the toad in the well, you'd find yourself a toad, and you would name the toad after the person you would want to have cursed. And the toad would be, you would call them that name, and they would put on, you say, you did this, you did this to my mother, you did this to me, you did these terrible things to the family, blah, blah, blah. You hurt me for no reason. You were well out of order. You stole a load of money off me. Then what they did was they would throw the toad into a well. Now the toad, it would usually be a well that would have a rock on it or a way for the toad to get out of the water. So the toad would be trapped in a well, imprisoned. But amazingly, the toad would be safer down there than he would be up, or she would be up on the land, for the simple reason that although they were alone and trapped in the well, they could eat, there was lots for them to eat, insects were down there, but they were safe from snakes, and they were safe from herons and other predators who could prey with them on the ground. And this was because they were in bondage. And excuse me. And the toad was in prison. So it was a way of putting the toad, the person you hated, in prison. And often if you did that, they would do something like one famous story of Kenneth Anger, the film director, cursed the guy from a band who had stolen huge amounts of money off him and basically destroyed him in Hollywood. And he put the curse of the toad in the well on him. And this guy ended up joining the Manson family and ended up spending the rest of his life in prison because of the Manson killings, even though he had no criminal record before the curse was put on him. And it was just a chance that he ended up with the Mansons, that the truck he was in broke down outside this bag ranch. Magic is real, and magic works. And this is why I don't do cursing for lots of reasons, because when you think about it, although the curse was successful, it did result in the murders of Sharon Tate and the LaBianca family. So you see, that's why I don't push cursing, because it's almost like a grenade being thrown into a crowd where if your enemy is in there, you throw a grenade at them and it blows up, you'll kill innocent people too. And that's profane. That's not the greatest way to deal with this, is to transcend it where you're not in pain anymore, or you're not angry anymore. And that's how you build a charismatic charge. That's why people are bitter and angry and want to get back at people. We do that afterwards. I don't want to be around them. Poison, pure toxic poison. And they'll find themselves alone very quickly. Where if you can detach yourself from that, people will drawn to you. Your charismatic charge is building, and that's the magical process in that way. Rather, the best way to curse someone is to learn that you don't have to curse them anymore. And the same, that's almost a very Zen thing. But these things, like you get in Vedic cultures and so on, yeah, that's what they come from. This is enlightenment and wisdom. In the folk magic thing, it's still stuck, like even the curse of the toad in the well, or placing 2 pomegranate seeds in the eyes of a black cat you just killed. They're from the past. They're from ancient times. And you have people still doing this stuff today. But how effective is it, using, well, not to say they're doing that, but doing other things regarding flowers and herbs and stuff? How effective are they in an age where there's so much chemicals in the food, or there's so much poison in the air? We have electromagnetic pollution all around us. I often wonder how light pollution has affected astrology. That's one of the things I've often thought about, is that has light pollution from cities actually affected the accuracy of astrology? And when that's the modern world, unless we have a catastrophe that throws us back to the Middle Ages, we're going to have to live with it. And therefore, our agrarian magic, folk magic, will have to transcend into the modern domestic magic in our apartments and our houses and our appliances. Now, I've been experimenting with this for a while now. And one of the most useful devices I found was a microwave oven. A microwave oven is a greatly underutilized resource and exploitable resource in terms of magic. Now, just think about it. There is an enormous coil at the back of a microwave oven that produces an enormous amounts of power and energy. And it focuses all on a rotating disc, where there's a light shining on it and a humming sound. Now, when this is over, go into your kitchen if you have a microwave, switch it on, and just watch that tray rotating in the light. Switch the light off in your kitchen. See how hypnotic the speed it turns at. You're looking at a kind of a tabernacle, and the humming's of the coil as it's producing enormous amounts of energy. And at the end, you get ding, a bell book and candle. Candle is the light of the microwave. The bell is when the time is up, and the book is the spell that you put in there. So for instance, you have a sigil, or you have a talisman, or you have a book of desires. I've done this with the book of desires. You put the book into the microwave and you select a setting on it that has, if you can do it to precise increments like 70 seconds, 77 seconds or 77 minutes, whatever. It won't go on fire if it's a book. I've tried it. And put the microwave on, power, watch it spinning around in the dark. Concentrate your will into everything inside that book coming into manifestation. Rotating. Bing! Light goes off and you're in the dark. Your nervous system has now been attenuated to the point where there's a pure stream of energy between you and you're getting help from the microwave coil, the usual charging device at the back. I've had very, very good results with that. Very amazingly results with that. And that's a classic example of taking folk magic and bringing it into the technological age, something like that. Tape recorders were also another one. I used to take tape recorders and I used to record sentences and leave them remained unfinished. Then play the tape recorder back. And so I'd be talking or saying something, sometimes read from a book or a random passage. And then I would continue it on, whatever came into my mind. And then I would find that when my voice started up again, a minute or so along the tape, I'd forgotten what I'd said there, but it would pick up perfectly what I had said in between. So there was a remarkable thing between that. That was like a kind of it was a kind of an automatic writing thing done with the two things at the same time, the two tape recorders, the one that's playing it back and the one that's recording it. Go into your kitchen. There's devices everywhere, blenders. There's all kinds of things. In American kitchens, they have that thing where you can just a waste disposal thing in the sink. You have something that troubles you, create something on a carrot or something like that, and then push it down through that waste disposal thing while the motor is running to destroy it. And remember, magic only works if it's done in private. So these are private moments alone. This is why I'm telling people when you're doing the ritual with the egg, under no circumstances, show me the egg or put it on. Some have done already. So now you really have to start over again. This is a private thing. And that moment, unless it's someone you love or very close to, like your family or your children or your loved one, when you're doing that ritual at the river, private. Don't record it. Don't tell anyone about it. Don't show the graphic. Keep it for you, because this is your moment to attenuate your nervous system and to create a pure stream of energy. When you do this, I would also suggest that when you do this, to keep a pouch of sea salt handy on you when you get home that night and sleep with it. Not because anything will go wrong, just it helps to, you'll find when you do this on October 31st, and you will find that you will be buzzing, you'll be like, wow, like this kind of thing. You have to then calm down from that. An orgasm shouldn't last forever. You have to calm down from that. And the salt in the pouch when you go to bed brings you back into equilibrium in your nervous system. And this is very important because how this stuff works is you put it out there and you forget about it. You know, when you plant a seed, when you plant fruit in your garden, do you not, who sits there going, now it's a seed, right now the seed is opening and the stamen is coming out and it's digging through the, you don't think like that. You sit there one day, you plant a seed, you walk away, you get on with your life, you do your work, you do your normal things. One day, oh look, the shoots are up. Oh, look at that, the shoots on the pumpkins are up. And then you forget about that, and then you have a look every so. Oh look, they're bigger. There's leaves on them now. Oh look, the flower came in. Oh. And then you see the flower disappears, and the first part of the pumpkin starts appearing. You're not sitting there thinking about it constantly. You're just, oh, there it goes. The same thing with this. And when you do this ritual with the egg, and any ritual like that, you just walk away, forget about it, and you don't objectively go looking for the empire of false pestilence and decay. It will happen anyway. And you do not go objectively go looking at typing the word egg into the search engine. They'll appear by themselves. You'll be walking down the street one day and you'll see a billboard that says eggs are a magical food, things like that. Eggs are a magical food. Eggs, and or maybe an ad that says eggs are the healthy choice. Go to work on an egg. You'll see these kinds of things, egg festivals and all kinds of things like this. And this is the quantifier. The quantifier is also a very romantic and poetic thing. I want to talk about this. There's a great romance and a great poetic element to these processes. That the universe doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it does, but it always gives you what you need, and it gives you what you need. And so therefore you may have a magical operation. Now I'm talking about, you can go to any book of magic, anything like that, and you can work on that and do the process, make a sigil, whatever, and then leave it and say, let's see what happens. And it might not come true, but it might come true in a different way. So for instance, you might say, I want lots of money. I need more money. Okay. Well, money is not just going to appear out of the blue. It's not going to just appear out of the blue. And so if you successfully do the operation and the function, the process happens, the psychic force will do something to the subatomic field that will open up a path for you towards that. For instance, you might be offered a new job with a lot more money. You might be offered the ability to sell a house. The money comes that way. You could be very pathological in your approach and say, I want $10 million, and you're hitting a very bad car accident, and you get a $10 million settlement in your insurance, but it's no use because you're in a wheelchair. So there's a poetic unfoldment. It gives you what you want, and that's why I said the purity of desire. If your heart has a pure desire for this, you'll get what you want. Another quantifier is dreams. This is very interesting because when this initial stories in the media about how are your dreams, why are your dreams so strange during lockdown? And this shows you that the establishment, that the globalists know about magic and stuff like that. They study this stuff too, of course they do. Excuse me. And I guess it's up here. And they studied these things, and they were fascinated by our dreams. They were fascinated by how we were dreaming, what we were dreaming, what we were talking about, what we were feeling, because the dreams were quantifiers of our emotional reaction to the lockdown. And they wanted to know our emotional and psychic reaction to the lockdown so they could quantify how they had produced the lockdown from that point onward. And I've been even hearing stories of places where there's been political unrest, such as in Seattle, where there's been posters on walls asking people, would you take part in a dream experiment by telling us what your dreams are? This is very sinister stuff. They want to know, they're quantifying their own black magic. You see, that's ultimately what the COVID-19 whole thing is. It's a black magic spell upon us. And they need to get comparative data. And your dream world is part of this. And this is why you're fine. This is why I tell people, it's like, lay off the alcohol and the weed and all the other stuff like that if you can, because you need your dreams to help you quantify this stuff. And the dreams are very much related to this poetic unfoldment, that the dreams are very rich in allegory, rich in symbolism, rich in statement. And they may seem incredibly confusing, but if you know from doing a dream work, you don't quantify your dreams from day to day. You quantify your dreams to find a narrative over a series of 6 months. That's why you keep a dream diary, okay? Now, they wanted a number of group dreams in order to quantify if their stuff was working. And that's why they're very interested in their dreams at the moment. This is very sinister stuff, by the way. This is one of the reasons our desire is pure. With the passing of the Empire of False Pestilence ritual, our desire is true. We're not trying to hurt people. We're not even trying to hurt them. We're just basically saying, leave the creators alone. Leave the human spirit alone. And we're not picking on any one individual. We're not going after Bill Gates or anyone else. This is specifically, we're tackling a power force. Now, every ritual opens and closes, okay? So, this is the whole thing, that when you have a ritual, you begin it, you open it, and you close it, okay? Now, this ritual has begun with the egg being put the sigil on it. The closing will be the moment it hits the water. It's gone. That's the closing. Bell, book, and candle. Now, that came from Catholicism, believe it or not. Now, one of the reasons why the Catholic Church has fallen apart in recent times, and we found out about all these horrible scandals and everything, is I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that they moved away from the Latin Mass. When Catholicism had the Latin Mass, people who were old enough to remember that before Vatican II in 1967 would talk about going to Mass, and they were saying, you didn't understand a word the priest was saying, but between that and the rituals and the transubstantiation and the incense and the priests in talking in Latin and the hymns, it was just magical. In fact, the Lutherans used to call the Catholic Mass Hocus Pocus, and that's where Hocus Pocus became associated with magic. Hocus Pocus was what they used to call the Catholic Mass. And it was right after Vatican II, when they dropped the Catholic Mass, the Latin Mass, that the Catholic Church went into immediate decline. Its reputation and everything fell apart from that point on, because it was not using a software that was developed in the ancient pagan temples of Rome, in the temples of Jupiter, in the Oracle of Delphi, in the Temple of Athena or Minerva, at the sacred groves of Diana. This was a language that had an ancient magical power. And this is why royalty continued to use it and so on for so long. Latin was a software language that came from an ancient magical tradition. And when the Catholic Church dispensed with that, they lost their magic, because the software they had wasn't enough. And this is why they're frantically scrambling right now to become Muslims and stuff like nonsense like this with this new Pope Francis. They're desperately trying to get back to where they were, where if they just went back to the Latin Mass, they probably would achieve a lot of the goals that they're trying to, a lot of the things they're trying to fix. And this is the reason why you have the opening and closing of rituals. It's the same reason you have the opening and closing of electrical circuits. So, you have an electrical circuit, you put the battery on the connector, it runs through all the diodes and transistors and resistors and makes the speaker work and blah, blah. But it goes back from the positive, it goes from the 9-volt battery, it goes from the positive terminal, runs through the circuit and goes into the negative terminal, back into the battery. And that's the closing of the circuit. And that's why sigils and seals look like, so many of them, particularly the 72 from the Lesser Key of Solomon, so many of them look like electrical diagrams. You see everything there, potentiometers. And if you look, especially if you look at the schematics, the electrical schematics of things like vacuum tubes, or valves as we call them in this part of the world, they look just like sigils. And that's why, because they're an electrical circuit on a piece of paper that you've drawn. And that's why you have to have the circle around them. This is one of the things I don't agree with modern chaos magic, is that the tendency to do the circuit and not do the sigil and not put a circle around it. I think that is, the circle around it performs the act of shielding. If you have, you have any, like in electronics, if you have a device, often it's surrounded by a metal case, and the metal case is called shielding, and that's to prevent any outside, especially sensitive electronic things like cameras, the old cameras, and the old analog cameras, not the digital ones. And that would stop exterior signals from getting in and showing up as interference in the old TVs or the old radios or the old cameras. It's the same thing with the sigil. I'm not crazy about this idea of a standalone sigil without the circle around it. The circle around, to me, is the actual shielding that prevents outside interference from impinging itself upon the sigil. There's also other systems of sigils where people draw sigils like clusters, or some people call them shoals, like shoals of fish, where they work together to, instead of like one sigil saying, get me money, one might say, get a job, cut back on my spending, save better. And on the past tense, I've saved money, I've got the better job, I have a better investment portfolio, I'm spending less, I've spent less. And all these together create wealth as a kind of a cluster. Interesting idea, but again, these processes are often done without the circle written around the sigil or seal. And I'm not crazy about that. One place you should not put a circle around it is you should all begin to create yourself a personal moniker or a symbol or a logo. You've all seen mine. It's the kind of looks like an anchor with a dollar sign. It's a symbol that I created about 15 years ago. It's been very successful for me. And that one, because you want that to radiate outwards into the field, you don't put a circle on. You don't put a circle around that. In the other ones where you're concentrating the sigil into a specific point in time, you have the circle around that because you're concentrating in the working into a specific circle. That's where it is. Put the sigil away and forget about it. Some people destroy them. It doesn't matter. Charging them, go to a fairground when they reopen and go on the helter skelter. Jump out of parachute. If you always wanted to try parachuting, a bungee jumping, George, jump out and stare into the seal as you're going downwards, as your adrenaline is rushing and your pure psychic energy. Because remember, attenuation, you've removed all the inhibitors except you and the because you're terrified of dying, you and the sigil. Now, the sigil making thing, we all know the classic story of that. I'm not going to go too deep into it. Basically, you write down what you want in the past tense, like my book Sorcery goes into it. I have a new car, okay? And then you remove the vowels, and then you remove the repeating consonants. And what you have left are the letters that you use to make the sigil into any kind of shape you want. And a lot of that is a kind of a process of concentration. And it's not entirely necessary. I think you could actually do a kind of a pictorial sigil or a graphical sigil. It not necessarily comes from the sentence. You could be meditating on it while you're writing it. When you think about it, something like a voodoo doll is a type of sigil. It's just in the shape of an anamorphic doll of a human being, but it's still a kind of a sigil to cause harm to someone. But the thing is that the closing of the sigil, when the thing has been attained, you throw the sigil away, destroy it. But you can actually just get rid of the sigil beforehand. Put it away somewhere you forget about it, bury it, where someone will never find it. So it automatically kind of destroys itself, becomes innate in itself, and the inertia of that comes in automatically. And this is the art thing again. The more creative you are about it, often the better it is, big time. Like I was talking to a person who used to do embroideries of sigils, this kind of thing. Now, there's also, in terms of your own personal marking, your own personal seal, things you can do to get that into the quantum field. It's a really silly thing we can do, is you can put it on, get a Sharpie pen and draw it on money. And when you're paying at these automatic teller and automatic checkout places at supermarkets, which you shouldn't do because they put people out of jobs, but a way of actually reversing that is to put your moniker or your own personal magical symbol on that, or your signature, and feed it into those machines, and they actually puts it into the system. It enters into the money banking system. It's very powerful, actually. When you see your seal being sucked into the machine, it's now into the world of finance and money. It's now part of a very powerful thing. And what's money? Currency, to flow, affluence. and it's a, and be meditative of it, putting it in there, and you find mad things, like you get change that's like 666. That's a one that happened. Like I'd get €6.66 back after buying some things, random groceries. I wouldn't know what the total would be. You find 333 and that kind of thing. Now, talk about 333 and the concept. Why are demons used in magic? Well, demons are just a name that's used for an entity that does not exist within space-time. Now, I don't know if I've looked in this for years. I'm not for sure what they are. They could be part of our consciousness, like the whole idea of the daemon within us. I think that's what it is, really. Genius, as the Greeks call it. And because your subconscious mind is not demarcated by present space-time or the clock speed of your brain, it knows the future and the past. And that's why the globalists were very interested in what people were dreaming during the lockdown months, because they wanted to know what the future held. Will their plans work, or will their plans fail? And I believe that they saw in that dream data that they gathered from psychiatrists and psychologists, and also from these people asking people to send in their dreams, that they determined that the empire of false pestilence had fallen. And what they're trying to do now in keeping the lockdowns and everything going and talking about putting us under further lockdowns is the desperation to try and make what those dreams showed change. And this is why I think they're looking for second lockdowns and third lockdowns, is because they can get dream analysis data from them too. Because they know that the subconscious mind is not hindered by present space-time. It actually works outside the subatomic fabric that operates at clock speed of our brain and our nervous system. And magic is that process. Is that from the start where I was? I said it's the process of hacking the subatomic matrix in order to cause change in the material world. And this fabric of reality is dense, but because we're a remarkable species, human beings, and we can do things like dream, and we can analyze our dreams and see. We have the likes of Carl Jung and people like that who've done great gifts to humanity. This is what Vanese was talking at the beginning about. The non-material is where real science will develop. This is where we have eureka moments, where many of the great scientific things were not discovered by people sitting in a lab with white coats and having microscopes, but they were like someone sitting in a bath or riding a bicycle or something like that. Because again, their conscious mind drifted outside the domain of fixity and conscious fixity, and their cognition became something else. And they became like when someone experiences Maslow's peak experience, that there's something phenomenal about the process of being a human being. And magic allows us to enjoy that for the rest of our lives. Now, as we're coming up to the end of the 90 minutes, close to it, I want to talk about something that people have brought up. If magic is so effective, how come the likes of Crowley and Austin Osman Spare didn't end up multimillionaires curing their physical ailments and becoming what they want? Well, for starters, they didn't end up as failures because we know about them today. Okay, Crowley in his life basically created the 20th century, so that's not failure. Austin Osman Spare has, we wouldn't have artists like Geiger and so on, H.R. Geiger, and that kind of artwork and that kind of artistic world, and also the modern versions of magic, chaos magic, without him. Same with Jack Parsons. We wouldn't have had rocketry. We wouldn't have got to the stars without him, or to off-world, off this planet. And even though he was blown up, and the rest of the other two died basically, well, they didn't die in poverty, but they didn't die affluent or anything like that. Well, the reason for that is, it's just like explorers. They were explorers into a new territory. And let's take something like the great Portuguese era of navigation and exploration. We all know about the ones like McNeill who went out there and came back, Vasco da Gama. The ones who went out there, discovered the world, circumnavigated the globe, found Africa, etc., and came back. There was lots who didn't. And that's what Crowley and Austin Osman Spare were. And also the ones who discovered these things, like who circumnavigate the globe and so on, these people didn't reap the riches that the ones who went out later on did. So you think in terms of the likes of Crowley and Austin Osman Spare and Jack Parsons having sacrificed themselves to allow us to have this discussion and this lecture and this talk tonight, and to unleash the possibilities and the potentials that they had opened for us. They were the pathfinders. They broke into the territory. They created the trade routes of magical possibility that we are now trading upon and working upon. And that's the nature. You see that with so many in the arts, great artists who are groundbreakers in so many of the arts, they tend to die young. And this or have not particularly happy lives. Van Gogh, he basically discovered particle physics through his paintings. I mean, if you look at paintings like Starry Night, he painted them on not long before Max Planck and the quantum physicists discovered the underlying nature of the universe, that there was nothing underneath there except swirling energy and swirling quantum effects. And he was painting it in his own paintings through his individual brushstrokes. And he died young, and he didn't sell, I think he sold one painting in his lifetime. But look what the legacy he's left. Look what the legacy, and this you see this all through mythology of the artist who sacrifices themselves in order to create the new possibility going forward. The whole thing of standing on the shoulders of giants, even like Tesla. Yeah, I mean, he's not as obscure as some people think he is. I mean, he does have like a unit of measurement named after him, and he is considered by scientists to be a great mind. But at the same time, too, he didn't have a particularly happy life, and he came to a rather sort of like disappointing end to his life story. But he was a groundbreaker. He smashed open reality and used whatever he could, just like Parsons did with rocketry. And they gave a gift that the ones followed on later. And this is the purpose of the magical thing, is to smash open the reality. But some smash open first and pay a price for it. They haven't failed. They've just had injuries from being in the first ones on the front to charge into the front line. And that's all that's about. So it's not like the likes of Crowley and Austin. It's not like people say, this often puts people off magic. Oh God, I don't want to go into magic. Look what happened Crowley, and look what happened Austin Osman Spare, and look what happened Jack Parsons. Yeah, but you're very rare that you're going to be a groundbreaker. That you're a pathfinder. What you're doing is you're standing on the shoulders of those giants. And so that's basically it in terms of this tonight's lecture. There's other things I could cover, but I don't want to go smashing into it all in one go. But I hope you've learned a lot from this tonight, and you know, get out there and do this thing on the 31st. You saw that I'm no bluffer with the whole octopus thing, and now we can take this to the next level. And it's not me that's doing this. It's just I'm like I'm like the guy who wrote the music, and you're all the band. You're the ones that bring it into sound and bring it into reality. You're the musicians, and I'm really eager to make this thing happen and make this thing work. So, you know, October 31st, get your egg and let's hatch a new reality for the people who deserve it. So thanks very much. And now I'll take any questions going. Thank you, Vanese.
No worries, my love. That was amazing. And guys, just so you know, I've spent about 6 months really focusing on magic. And I want to say that tonight, Thomas has delivered some incredible wisdom bombs, right? And you might not have caught them because they came so quickly and so fast, but I'm going to give you the video, and please watch it again and watch it again, because Thomas he really knows what he's doing. And look, the thing that we found is that magic has been a part of human history for the entirety of human history, except for the last couple of 100 years, okay? And there's a reason for that. It's been hoarded, okay? And we need it now more than ever. So listen to this man. Listen to this man learn what you can from him because we really, really need it. All right. Now, let's get some. Oh, also support him. I've put the link in there, guys. Please. Thomas is making some films, and it would be so fabulous to have him even more funded to get more films. So please, click on that link and let's see where the questions are. I better put my glasses back on. All right. So, sweetie, here we go. Question from Miriam. How do you know the personal sigil? What would the statement be like? Oh, how do you do the personal sigil? What would the statement be like?
You could use like a monogram of your own initials, or you could take your own initials or a nickname that you have for yourself and stylize them in a certain way that they look like nothing else in the world. And that's all there is to it. It's the same thing. It's like cut-ups. You've heard of the whole concept of the cut-ups, where you take words and you cut them up and arrange them into sentences. And it's another way of hacking the matrix. That was a very popular thing in the 1950s and into the 70s. David Bowie constantly did it. It's a similar kind of idea. Play around with something you have, your initials, a nickname for you, and try and reduce it down into a unique shape that's not a million miles from something that could look like a magical symbol. You'll get there.
Sweetie, how could a sigil go wrong? Kieran would like to know.
You weren't fully focused on it when you did it. You didn't charge it properly. You didn't charge it at all. You charged it using someone else's energy. So, for instance, you walked up to somebody and you went up and punched them and knocked them down and looked at the sigil while you were punching them. That's a thing where you can, because you stole their energy rather than using your own. You can, a common one that was big among the hippies back in the hippie days was to put the sigil on the forehead of your lover. And when you're having an orgasm, you would concentrate on the sigil on their forehead. And the man and the woman, that was a big hippie thing, and connected to the third eye thing. But if you did that with, say, a prostitute without telling them or something like that, well, then you're stealing their energy, and you have a wild animal within the process that you can't tame because it's not your psychic energy. You must maintain that it's your psychic energy involved in the process and nothing that's been harvested off anyone else without consent.
Sweetie, now, Jonathan has a question that during your podcast, you have said that sex magic is dangerous and risky, but you didn't explain what those risks are. What are they? I seem to have cultivated the charisma you alluded to, and a lot of women are drawn to me. The last girl I had sex with had what I can only describe as an exorcism, and I wasn't even trying to do anything deliberately. I'm trying to understand the energy of sex, and I don't know who I can talk to about it. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I don't know what your complaint is. And second,
Sorry.
you're over analyzing your good luck there. And secondly, yeah, I mean, the sexual charge is a unique type of charge. This is why people like Willem Reich and so on, with orgone energy and so on, was so heavily involved in the orgasm as a power driver, as a prime mover. The thing is, the way sex magic is dangerous is because, okay, it's the sex magic itself is not dangerous. Okay, what I was talking about was the New Agers and their sex magic. There was about 4 years ago, there was a trend within New Age circles of doing sex magic, and you're having these New Age couples, right? And they'd be having sex, and they'd be saying, and during your bondage, you create a magical child, okay? And that, the magical child, yes, that's part of the whole concept. If he's wearing a condom, without being too anatomical, the charge from the end of his willy does not ground itself in the female. Therefore, you've created a magic homunculus, what you've really done. And this could manifest as an entity being born in a later child, or as a kind of a symbiotic child within your body that grows up as a tumor or something like that, or grows up to be a kind of a twin inside yourself that causes things like schizophrenia. Yeah, for instance, for starters, you can't use condoms when you're doing sex magic. You just can't. It's like It just, you need the charge. You need that charge to be completed in the circle. Okay, remember I said about the circle, negative and positive. And secondly, this magical child, you have to sit down and really think about what it is, what it's going to be. You just don't two new agers saying, oh, let's make her a magical child of our will. It doesn't work like that at all. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the next child that those types had, that woman had, it might be not a very nice human being brought into this world. It may have been a repository for an entity or something like that. Sex magic is not dangerous. Just don't take it as a joke. That's the whole thing.
Sweetie, I have another question about timing. I'm going to combine two of them. Lynn wants to know, is there a particular time for launching sigils? And Kieran is asking, are the phases of the moon relevant at all?
No, I don't believe in that stuff anymore. The reason why they would use the phases of the moon was to build up excitement, like the way I'm using the 31st of October. It can do it anytime you want. The reason why they use the phases of the moon or the equinoxes or the solar, the solstice and stuff like that was truly just building up to the date. Like, like coming up to a festival, coming up to a party, coming up to, Christmas. It's like the building, like we're getting there, it's going to be. And so by the time you get there, the charge has been built up with excitement. By the time you get that, you can do that without the phases of the moon. Now, a lot of female magicians find great power in using the moon, but not males. And I'll tell you why. Because the moon is directly related to the menstrual cycle of the female, and also things like the releasing of eggs and stuff from her. So the female, that's why the female, we have Selene and Diana and Luna, is for female goddesses in the moon. So the female is very much, can be really helped by using lunar events in terms of their rituals, but they're not necessary. They're not necessary. It's purely a theatrical thing. Remember, there's a lot of theater involved. On the next quarter moon, on this, when the clock strikes the third hour past midnight, you're building yourself up at there. You build this drama, it's like the beginning of a great play, or a building up of a piece of music, a crescendo or something, and then you have the full performance. But it's a helping tool, but I don't believe it's necessary. No, not at all. You can do it in the middle of an afternoon on a beach in California, where you're surrounded by surfers. You can still do it there.
Sweetie, in terms of protecting your charisma, Simon and David have two kind of similar questions. Is there a way to protect your charisma, a firewall? And what happens if somebody is doing you harm? How do you handle that?
Well, if someone is doing you harm, you can tell it by, you will have, and generally it's lethargy and confusion, brain fog. That's a common thing of it. Lethargy, brain fog. Not quite, things aren't working, everything's going wrong. You have to, to use Tony Soprano, the opposite of this, the Midas touch, everything you touch turns to shit. It has that's when you notice something being done for you. Protecting yourself couldn't be easier. As soon as you suspect something like that, sleep with a pouch of salt, organic sea salt, under your bed, and have like white quartz crystals around you if you can. And that will diffuse the charge, because remember, we're dealing with electricity and electromagnetics. Remember, it's the nervous system here, and that will diffuse the charge. It's very simple to deal with, but as soon as you feel that you have something like that on you or near you, a psychic attack or something, salt and white crystal, and the raw white crystal, not polished white crystal, salt, sea salt, and white crystal are your best friends.
Sweetie, Linda is wondering, if we're talking about the Empire, are we not just giving them more energy to harvest?
No, because it's all empires are a fact. They exist. The Roman Empire exists. The British Empire existed. They all fell, though. And the same thing. Empires, just because an empire, where does the word empire and immortality come? They're not. They fall. You recognize your enemy by understanding what your enemy is, and then you take them on. We're dealing with an empire, and we're dealing with an empire just like people dealt with the British Empire, the Roman Empire, any empire, the Spanish Empire. By understanding what it is, and then you know the possibilities of how to undermine it. You don't walk up to a castle that's heavily fortified and say, why are we calling it a castle? Just call it a house. No, it's a castle. And the only way you're going to storm that castle is by thinking about it as a castle. So that's why it's no problem calling it an empire.
But sweetie, in watching your posts, for example, you won't use the name of certain things because you don't want to give it energy, right? So I think that's what more saying
Yeah,
is
but
that
I haven't named an individual like I haven't named Bill Gates. I haven't
yeah,
named George Soros.
yeah,
The empire becomes a avatar of the system rather than the actual system itself. It is a chimera, a representation, a symbol of it, but it's not it. If I was to say we're going to hex Bill Gates, well, all we do is make him more powerful.
fabulous,
A,
John. Last,
the empire of false pestilence. What was I saying about a poetic element of it?
yes, indeed,
Poetry.
indeed.
Every great.
No, I loved it when I first heard it, and just so everybody knows, if you go to YouTube, Thomas has a extended video on this as well. If you want to go through the instructions again, so you can look at that up on YouTube.
It's on the Open Source Occult TV channel.
Open source occult, and just so you know, the reason that we're doing this is I was so just passionate about this egg idea that I said to Thomas, come on, we have to get more people to do it because I know what we're doing here. I know the power of this idea. So spread the word as well, guys. Put that video out there. Let's get millions of eggs. And somebody asked if we can do more than one egg. And I said, yes, we can. Can't we, darling? You can do more than one.
Yeah, and you can also, you can do more than one egg once it's on the same date at the same time. So it's kind of hard to hold more than 3 or 4 eggs, but drop them all at the same time.
Good to know. And don't drop them in the ocean. You have to drop them in a river or a lake.
That flows to the ocean.
Flowing.
So, or no, not a lake. It has to be, or unless it's a lake that outflows into a river that goes to the sea. It has to be the transformation across the threshold from fresh water to salt water. And this is why things like salmon rivers, if you live in British Columbia or Scotland or Ireland, salmon rivers are very powerful in this process. Or rivers that have where ships were built and sent out to the world, or great trading ports, this kind of thing, or ports with great history where the river flows out into the sea. That's a tremendous charge that we're capitalizing on.
Kieran's going to do the Thames. Yay.
Thames.
Thames.
Well, that's the Thames. Well, that's the best thing about it, is that I think it's what we're into hundreds of people now are signed up, and maybe thousands, and they're doing it in rivers all over the world. The whole planet, the 7 seas of the earth, will now have this intention put into it. This will be global. It'll be mega. Even only if 100 people do it, the geographic spread is going to be phenomenal.
Joseph said, you mentioned the Jupiter temple, a pagan temple. Where was that located? And also, what was there before the churches?
Well, there's Jupiter temples everywhere. Before church, well, there's temples of Jupiter, Diana, and even Notre Dame is built upon the temple of Vulcan, which is amazing because that thing went up in flames. But these temples were built on, these Christian churches were built upon pagan temples, often, not always. And they were built upon temples where there was 2 reasons for this. One, the stone was there, they could just rebuild it. Sometimes they just reused the building as they were. The roads leading to it were handy because people took pilgrimage routes in pagan times. There's lots of reasons why they did them, but they also knew that the stones had a special power inside them, and that's why they saved them. And that's why they mimic, and if there wasn't a stone building, they mimicked a grove. That's why the Gothic cathedrals have those columns. They're the giant and they go up to the ceiling. They're mimicking the groves of the pagans, of Diana, of the Druids, of the Nordic world. And that's why. So what was before them was a pagan temple. And if there wasn't a pagan temple, there was a sacred grove. And the Gothic cathedrals were built to look like symbolic pagan groves of stone.
Fantastic, sweetie. Well, I think that's it. Oh, there is one that wasn't, it's on the chat, not on the questions, but it is a good one. What happens if you're nowhere near a river? What do we do? I
mean, I find that hard to believe that, like, where, even in the Sahara Desert, there's rivers. I mean, when I've had people say this, if you could flush it down the toilet, if you know that your city's or your town's outlet goes to a river, you can do that. That's quite, if you live in an apartment building or you're disabled and can't get to the water fund, you can flush it down your toilet. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, buy a train ticket. I mean, that's all I can say. There's rivers everywhere. There's streams everywhere.
Well,
Sorry,
sweetie,
I can't help you. You know, but you know, public transport, buy a car. I don't know.
sweetie, this was just marvelous. Really, thank you so much. And thank you guys for your fabulous questions and showing up, and get your eggs, do the work. Let's blow this empire up. So thank you again, darling. Thank you so much. The video will be up as soon as I can process it. So I'll send it all out to you. And again, you're just a blessing to us, Thomas. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for having me again, and thanks for arranging this, and thanks to everybody for showing up and taking part in this this great fun. Remember,
Fantastic, Charlotte.
enjoy your life. That's the important thing of all, even your
Indeed.
magical life, especially.
Bye-bye, guys. You have a great day, night, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.